In 2019, with my smartphone in my hand and my laptop on my lap, I fell into a hole. I kept scrolling and clicking. You see, I couldn't stop scrolling the news. Scroll, scroll, click, click. I clicked and scrolled myself into a pit of doom. There was so much bad news. And it wasn't just the politics, and the pandemic wasn't even here yet. The West was completely on fire. The Midwest had floods like never before, devastating droughts in Africa lasting for decades, ice packs in the north and the south, the oceans are rising, and climate migrants escaping climate catastrophes. The climate crisis was no longer a debated prediction. It was here and now, and I could not look away. I just read everything I could read. I took in so much information. I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop. I was a mess. I was depressed. I felt helpless, hopeless, obsessed. Well, it wasn't too long where, fortunately, I ran into some folks at my church and we started talking about things, and I found out they felt exactly the same way I did. They were also in the pit of doom. I found my tribe. At least I wasn't alone anymore. So we sort of grouped ourselves up. Whenever we ran into each other or whatnot, we really became a kind of a support group for the helpless, hopeless, and obsessed. Right? So whenever we would meet, we'd work our steps, our support group steps, right? Step 1, complain conspicuously. Step 2, moan dramatically. Step 3, whine without ceasing. And then we'd go home, and right as soon as we got home, we got right online and sent each other more bad news. Books, articles, internet posts, hundreds of internet posts. Scroll, scroll, click, click. If we had had t-shirts, they would have said, Doom Scrollers Anonymous, and on the back, whatever you do, don't stop scrolling. Well, one day, between moaning and whining, our fellow worrywart, Terry, came late to the group. And she put a book down on the desk and said, we've got to read this. The book was Great Tide Rising by Kathleen Dean Moore. Well, we're in this thing together, right? So we start reading this and agree to read it and discuss it together. So I'm reading. More bad news. I learned that the Earth, because of climate change and habitat destruction, has lost all the abundance of individual bees, butterflies, moths, and dragonflies since 1970. 50% are gone. Whoa, I said to the book. 50% of our insects are gone? And then I thought, that explains why when I drive now in the countryside, my windshield stays all clear and gray. Remember? Not like it used to be all buggy when we were younger. I realized the world I grew up in is already disappearing. Okay, I'll keep reading. So I read more bad news. I learned because of human action, 1 million species will go extinct. Wait, I said to the book. You mean I'll lose the fireflies and bobwhite quail in my meadow? We will lose the sea turtles and salamanders and red foxes? If these can no longer flourish, how can my grandchildren flourish? My heart breaks when I think of that. I wanted to look away. I wanted to stop reading. I felt myself sliding back into the pit of doom. Wait, don't stop reading, says Terry. Keep reading. We're almost to the volcano. Volcano? How can that help? But we kept reading, and soon we had a page turner on our hands. We learned in 1980 a volcano blasted a hole in the earth at Mount St. Helens in Washington State. It was the most destructive volcano in U.S. history, destroying an area more than 230 square miles. When the scientists came to study after the eruption, when they came down, their helicopters down the ladder, still holding handkerchiefs over their faces because of the lingering ash in the air, and they surveyed the scene. Every tree stripped bare, every ridge line covered in cinders, all the streams filled with toppled trees and ash. They didn't believe, they just couldn't see how life would return to the mountains. They thought if anything would grow here again, its spore and seed would have to come from the outside edges of the devastation coming over all those miles of cinders and ash and death. Their hypothesis was it would be centuries before that life would return to the mountain. But they're scientists, and this is a perfect experiment. So they come every year, and they look and they examine at all the spots. After only a few years, turn the page, they found a few little spots of life. Now, this didn't fit the theory, but they thought, well, maybe just the odd bird or whatever came in. But then, only 2 decades into the study, these spots, they realized, were almost everywhere over the mountain if you just looked real closely. Little spots growing and beginning now to weave together. They couldn't figure it out. They were baffled. Their theory must be wrong. It did not take centuries. Now, those same scientists, only 40 years after the blast, they're on their knees, rubbing their hands over soft emerald moss growing underneath of lavish lupine blooms. I imagined, I really wanted to be there with them, right? So I imagined myself with them, and we're looking, and we see by the stream tracks of a fox family, and here a silver fir tree 10 feet tall. Under the tree, coyote scat is growing mushrooms. So what's the new theory? Turns out that when the volcano blasted the ash and rock over the landscape, it passed over areas behind a boulder here or a ledge there or a fallen tree, little areas where life was protected, like behind a small boulder some tiny ferns were saved. And over here, behind a little ledge, the tunnel to a vole's musty nest found shelter. From these small areas, life emerged. Grasses spread, strawberries sent out runners, mice and toads hopped out on the blasted plain. And that was just the beginning. It was on and on from thousands, tens of thousands, countless small protected places of enduring life, meadows and forests returned to the mountains. Well, it took our doom scrollers tribe a little while to let this story take root and grow in us. But gradually we changed our perspective and we asked some new questions. Now, we were still obsessed with climate crisis sweeping over our world like the volcano's blast, but we knew we couldn't stop it. That's the big truth of the big picture. But it's not the whole truth. Remember, the scientists thought the mountain was doomed because they couldn't see the tiny little hidden places right in front of them. So we said, well, wait a minute, what if there's something right in front of us that we could do that might make a little difference? Well, it's 2020 by then. So the pandemic had come and forced us outside. Well, out of doors, we learned some new stories that we couldn't find when we were scrolling inside on our screens. We got to looking around and thinking and remembering stories from bees and butterflies and birds. And those stories told us that those old landscape shrubs that were out in front of our church, I bet they're out in front of your church, those old landscape shrubs that have been there forever have served their purpose and need to go. It was like the birds and the bees were telling us, those won't do. What we need is native plants and trees and shrubs, native to North Carolina, to provide us food and shelter. They don't. So, we realized we knew just what to do. We dug up those shrubs and we created REFUGIA. We planted a habitat garden. And we did it to save the birds and the bees and the wildlife and to save us. And it worked. We're no longer doom scrollers. Now we're refugiarians. We will create refugia, you see. We'll be like a small boulder. We'll be like a little ledge. Some of us can plant habitat gardens all over the suburbs. Some of us can't do that, but we can write a poem or tell a story or find an old lonely person that needs a visit. We realize we need to save kindness and creativity as well, right? We need them more than ever. Every small act can be refugia, and from those small hidden places, new hope and possibilities can spread and seed our dying world. And it was then I realized if I was doing it, if I had found a way to make a difference, then we are doing it. That means that probably countless other people all over the world in small little hidden places that we don't really know about, they're doing it too. That's where I found my hope. Now, I've spent a lot of time in that garden, down on my knees digging, planting, weeding. I know all the neighbors and I know all the dogs. They walk by and we visit and they tell me how much they enjoy this beautiful, special garden right in their neighborhood with the changing colors of the seasons. And you'll probably have figured out that all of them know the REFUGIA story. And I spend my time there month after month. There's no other way I would have made it through the pandemic without my hands in the dirt of that garden. And I began to see the little bees and then bigger bees. And after I woke to them, I saw the moths and the butterflies and then the birds. And more join me and we meet each year. Busy bees, monarchs, hummingbirds, tiger swallowtails, cloudless sulfurs. And we have a crow. I remember the day that I first realized he was coming every time I was in the garden. He comes and he lands on the power pole by the street, and we greet each other. I say, well, actually, he always starts. Caw, caw, caw! Good morning, Mr. Crow. And we catch up on what's new. And then he flies. He flies up to the tallest point on the steeple above our church. And we visit a little more. And then I imagine what he sees from way up there. How he sees the big picture, and in the middle, our little refuge of hope and possibilities. So, I'm no longer out to save the whole world. Not in the same way. Because now I know that little things change things. And lots of little things can change big things. I am definitely no longer in a helpless, hopeless hole. However, I may still be a little obsessed. But now it feels like passion. it feels like love.
Thank you.